Welcome to Reinventing the Digital Agency Model. My name is George Demet. I'm the founder and co-CEO, along with Tiffany Ferris, who's right here in the front row, of Palantir.net. We're a digital consultancy of just under 50 people, designs and develops solutions for healthcare, higher education, technology, public sector clients using Drupal and other open source technologies. We're a fully remote company, and we're based near Chicago, USA. So before I kind of really dig into things, I wanted to do a little bit of a disclaimer here because I am speaking in Europe in front of a European audience that, you know, I am an American and I'm going to be talking primarily about what I've seen with other American companies, conversations I've had primarily with other American business owners. That said, I think a lot of what I'm going to say probably does apply to many European businesses as well. But I also want to acknowledge that European companies have pioneered many of the self-managing practices that I'm going to be talking about in this presentation. In fact, I don't know if there's anyone here who's from the Swiss agency, Leap, but they've actually been embracing agile self-organization even longer than we have. So I just want to be sure to acknowledge that. I think there's a few reasons that this has happened. One of which is that I think there's a stronger social safety net in Europe. So, for example, in America, businesses are responsible for providing health insurance and other benefits to their employees, which is not something that European businesses are necessarily responsible for. And I think that's one of the things, among others, that gives European businesses maybe a little bit more room to innovate when it comes to corporate structure. So, uh, so a few years ago, I attended a retreat of about 30 digital agency owners. The meeting was in Northern California. The agency owners were from all over the United States, a few from Canada. And over the course of 3 days, our group, which was almost entirely white men in their 30s to 50s, these weren't the actual people in this photo, but it gives you a pretty good idea of what the group was like. We discussed the challenges that we had running our businesses, right? Talked about things like the difficulty of finding work to keep teams billable, the pressure they felt to keep rates low while expenses keep going up, team members feeling overburdened with work, increased competition for senior level talent, limited time and resources for professional development, and senior manager and executive burnout. So, what I heard was nothing new to me, and I suspect maybe nothing new to some of you in this room. As somebody who's been the co-CEO of a digital agency for over 28 years at this point, I've experienced all of those challenges and more, right? I've also had many, many conversations over the years with my peers at other Drupal companies about how difficult it is to run businesses like theirs, like ours. And the more of these conversations that I've had, the more I've become convinced that there's something fundamentally broken about the digital agency model. So, how do we get here? One very common piece of advice you will hear if you run a digital agency is that you need to be increasing utilization, right? Utilization is the percentage of time that employees spend on billable work. There's a rule of thumb that says that a successful digital agency has a utilization rate between 75 and 90%. And the higher the better, right? So that means that we need to fill up as much of our employees' time as much as possible with billable work. In the context of a small agency, that might mean that somebody is working on up to half a dozen different projects at the same time. Another approach is to replace more expensive full-time employees with contractors, especially if they're located outside the United States, their hourly rate is much lower, and you don't have to worry, as I said before, about health insurance or other benefits. But unless they're fully embedded members of your team, working with contractors requires more management. And managers are incentivized to increase productivity and find efficiencies wherever they can. That's literally their job. They're looking for, this means that they're usually looking for easy short-term wins and aren't necessarily focused on long-term sustainability. And when everyone is doing this and trying to do more with less, the result is a race to the bottom. Another challenge of this business model is the hyper optimization, right? And this idea that we're trying to optimize as much as possible for that maximum amount of productivity makes companies more fragile and more vulnerable to changes in the market conditions, right? So if you were working on Drupal back in 2013 or 2014, when Drupal 7 had really hit its stride, you were on easy street because there was plenty of business to go around. That all changed in 2015 because everyone knew that Drupal 8 was right around the corner and it didn't make sense to invest in a brand new Drupal 7 site. Drupal 8 wasn't out yet, but why would you spend money on the old version if the new version's right around the corner? So a lot of people delayed their projects and the market for a time completely dried up. And that was an existential threat to a lot of companies in the Drupal ecosystem. So in more recent years, of course, we've seen disruptions due to the pandemic, fears about inflation. We've seen profitable tech companies laying off people just to juice up their stock prices, and just countless other things, right? So I'm aware of one agency that has spent the last couple of years, spent 2 years acquiring companies, going on a growth spree. Only then, when the market conditions change, have to have multiple rounds of layoffs. So they're actually, I believe, the same size or maybe even smaller now than when they started, right? And there's real consequences to this churn for organizations that go above and beyond the direct consequences for the people who lose their jobs, right? It leads to lost institutional knowledge, more pressure on those who are left behind, because no matter how well they plan they are, layoffs always lead to a decline in morale and more people choosing to leave your organization, including maybe some of those folks who you didn't want to leave. So it takes a tremendous amount of physical and emotional energy to rebuild after layoffs, and team performance almost always suffers. It's an opportunity to start with a fresh slate and rebuild better than you were before, but it's an incredibly painful way to get there. So, big question is, how do we affect lasting change that will make our companies more sustainable and robust, right? One of the things that I hear most often from agency owners is, well, they'd love to run their businesses differently. They don't feel like they have a choice, right? You have to keep food on the table, right? I appreciate that. For many years, I thought that there was one way to run a business as well. And if there were any problems, it was because we didn't have the right structure. So every couple of years, Tiffany and I would, maybe a couple other people, we would put a bunch of sticky notes up on a board. We would rearrange them around to see if we could find the structure that would finally support our growth at the next level. We'd put people in different roles. We'd see what worked, what didn't. And we might get some short-term gains out of this, but eventually the cracks would start showing and the cycle would start over again. But one of the things that was becoming clear to Tiffany and I is that as our company grew larger and as we put in more layers of management to support that growth, we were becoming increasingly disconnected from the day-to-day work of our team. We were starting to see fiefdoms develop in the organization, knowledge silos start to emerge, and the most concerning thing was that the company's culture and values were starting to shift in ways that we didn't feel really comfortable with. So after going through a few of those cycles, we realized that we needed to stop tinkering with the structure of the organization and instead try something completely different. But before I continue with that story, I need to make a little digression here into the different planes of human development and how they can be applied to organizations. Building on work done by Ken Wilber and others, Frederic Laloux identifies several different types of organizational models in his book, Reinventing Organizations, which is kind of like the kind of intro manual for anyone who's interested in learning more about self-organizing or self-managing teams. I have some water. Thank you. So the overall trend is from models that rely on dependence to ones that rely on independence to ones that rely on interdependence. Organizations that are further along the scale demonstrate better results from increased team engagement, as well as higher levels of trust and consciousness in their work and the impact that it has on the world around them. So, these planes can be very difficult to explain and to understand, so I'm going to use some examples from my favorite TV franchise that will hopefully make them a little bit clearer. So, first we start with red organizations, which rely on power and authority to get things done. So my example here is the Star Trek Mirror Universe, where kind of all the characters you know and love from Star Trek are evil now. And the way the ship is run, people are punished by, they've got these little devices called agonizers, which inflict pain on you if you fall short or step out of line. So in real life, an example might be the mafia, right? Like, don't cross the boss or you'll get whacked, something like that. So those are red organizations. Then you have amber organizations. Those are ones that rely on structures, roles, and compliance, right? I think it's a lot like the highly structured society of the Romulans in Star Trek, where military or political rank determines your social standing and dissent is frowned upon. In real life, you might think about it, the military or a government bureaucracy might be a good example. Then you have orange organizations. Those are ones that are focused on competition, growth, measurable results, return on investment, right? A great example is the hyper-capitalist Ferengi culture, which is governed by this gigantic set of rules of acquisition. And if you follow the rules of acquisition and you maximize your profits, then that's the key to success. So this paradigm says that if you can figure out how to give people the right incentives, you can get them to achieve your desired outcomes, right? That's probably sound familiar to folks, right? Because most large companies and most startups are like this today, right? They incentivize their workers to maximize productivity and returns for the company. And then you have green organizations, where everyone is like a family, both for better and for worse. I chose Deep Space Nine for this one because it's a show about a place where different people from very different backgrounds and perspectives try to live together in peace and harmony, despite facing challenges and threats both from the outside and within. So green organizations still have that kind of traditional pyramid structure, but they're focused on empowering people, living their values, and having a purpose that goes beyond their workplace. Again, in real life, you might look at companies like Ben & Jerry's ice cream. In the United States, we have Southwest Airlines as a good example. I mean, my observation is that actually most of the digital agencies in the Drupal ecosystem are a combination of orange and green. Green organizations can be really great places to work, but they can also run into trouble when the stated ideals of the organization don't match the lived experiences of the people who work there, right? So if there isn't sufficient structure or guardrails, informal power structures begin to emerge and people begin grouping themselves into insular groups that are built more around individual personality than shared purpose and value. So that leads us to the last type of organization on this chart, the teal organization. So in this model, a traditional pyramid-shaped organizational structure is replaced with an interdependent network of relationships between team members. The organization operates like a living organism where individuals and teams work together without requiring a high degree of centralized control. People dynamically take on roles and responsibilities based on the needs of the work that they're doing and the purpose of the organization. Teal organization operates a lot like the crew of Star Trek Discovery, especially in the kind of final couple seasons after the time jump, for those who are familiar with the show. They still operate within a hierarchy, but different crew members take on different roles at different times based on what they bring to the team as a whole. One of the things I really appreciate about Discovery is that all of the characters have gone through sort of extensive journeys of reflection and possess a high degree of self-awareness. There's no egos at play. Everyone knows what needs to be done and is willing to pitch in when and where they can add value. Contrast this, right, with an organization where when something goes wrong, people are quick to point fingers at each other or are reluctant to help out because that's someone else's job. The other thing I love about teal organizations is that while they require people to be open to new ways of looking at things, they can also meet people where they're at. So in the 5th season of Star Trek Discovery, we're introduced to a new character, Captain Rayner. I don't know if you can see it, he's the guy far over at the right, who's a new character to the show. He's very used to running things in a very rigid hierarchy. But over the course of the season, he learns to appreciate the different way that the Discovery crew works, and at a key moment is even able to draw upon his past experiences, his past trauma, to help them out of a really tight situation. So real-life examples of teal organizations include self-managing or self-directed companies like Patagonia or the Dutch healthcare organization Buurtzorg. So when you look at a chart like this, there's a very natural tendency to assume that, well, organizations that are further along these planes of development are better than others. But I want to be really clear that there's nothing actually wrong with any of these models as long as they're fit for purpose, right? So it's probably a really good thing that the military relies on structure, formal roles, and hierarchy. And if you're looking to grow quickly and make a splash in the market, then an orange organization might be the best way to do that. So, and of course, no organization is all one color or another, right? You can be a company that's very focused on people in some ways and very focused on achievement in others. So at Palantir, we're going through an SOC 2 cybersecurity audit right now, and it requires us to have very defined reporting roles and structures. It's very amber. But if you're in the middle of a cybersecurity crisis, that makes a lot of sense because what's most important in that situation is that you have clarity and that you are able to act quickly. All that said, the reality is that most hierarchies aren't well equipped to handle complex problems. Teal organizations have an advantage here because they're able to play in all the different spaces and draw upon the strengths of all the other colors. Plus, there's a ton of research that organizations that are able to successfully get to this stage are stronger and more stable, have better results, and higher employee satisfaction than more traditional companies in their sectors. All right, back to our story. So at that point, I would say Palantir was a very green organization with some orange mixed in. We could have stayed there, really doubling down on becoming as green a company as we could. And like I said, even though we were officially recognized as a great place to work in 2018, the company was moving in directions that Tiffany and I as owners didn't feel great about. We didn't have a great way to talk about it. Our managers didn't see the same problems that we saw, and they didn't want us to bring them directly to the team. Something needed to change. And if I'm being really honest, after doing the same thing for our entire adult lives, at that point, I think 22 of the 28 years that Palantir has been in business and dealing with the same problems over and over and over again, I I think we were both ready for something different. What we wanted to do was build an organization that was human-centered but didn't require individuals to sacrifice themselves to the whole. We wanted a company that was designed to meet the needs of today, but be able to scale to meet the needs of the future. We wanted to be a true learning organization where professional development is something that's integrated into our everyday work. And finally, we wanted to be an agile company that was able to solve really interesting and complex problems and have a positive impact on the world in reality, as opposed to something we said in our mission statement. So making this leap was a little bit scary. We didn't know if it would work, but we knew it was what we needed to do. So I need to give a lot of credit here to Tiffany for the principles that she came up with as we embarked on our redesign in earnest in 2018. We wanted to make sure that we weren't just addressing the surface layer issues, but actually taking the time and understand and address the root problems that we face. And as I said earlier, we wanted to make sure that what we were designing worked now and also would scale to meet our future needs. And then finally, Tiffany is a little bit of a martial arts fan. She found this Bruce Lee quote about adapting what's useful, rejecting what's useless, and adding what is specifically your own. So there's a lot of self-organizing models out there that we could have just picked up wholesale, right? Like holacracy. But we wanted to build something that was uniquely suited to the needs of our organization, our people, and our culture. So we did a lot of research and talked with a lot of experts as we embarked on this journey. One of the things that we knew is that we wanted to embrace Agile. Now, that doesn't mean use Scrum for everything. It means adopting the values expressed in the Agile Manifesto and the mindset that they come from, right? Valuing individuals and interactions over processes and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and responding to change over following a plan. So on the right there, you'll see a version of the Agile Onion, which is a graphic created by Simon Powers of Adventures with Agile, which is one of the early Agile consulting and training companies. He observes that even within a command and control hierarchy, you can adopt Agile tools, processes, and practices, right? Anyone can use Jira. But to fully embrace the principles, values, and mindset of Agile requires structural and cultural change as you move toward becoming a learning organization. So for us, that meant that we would experiment as we embarked on our journey, testing assumptions and iterating as we went based on real-world feedback. We would be disciplined in how we worked with each other, flexible in how we worked with our clients, and we would optimize for focus and flow. So in terms of that focus and flow optimization, one of the biggest changes that we made early on was to shift to half and whole time allocations and billing. People would either be allocated full-time on one project or half-time on two projects. No one would be resourced to more than two projects at a time, and which helped cut down on the context shifting, gave team members more time to focus on their work and to understand the context into which it fit into the whole. Really important when you're dealing with really complex projects. Another big shift was the transition to dedicated project teams. So when a client works with Palantir, they're working with a dedicated cross-functional team. The composition of that team may change over time, depending on the needs of the project, but the idea is that there's as little churn as possible. And then finally, to support this, it meant that before I get into that part, I should talk about clarity of roles, charters, working agreements. Whenever we start a project, one of the first things we do is we sit down and we make sure that everyone understands and is agreement on what it is that we're working on, what the goals are. So a great example is, you'll find out a little bit more about this, I think, tomorrow, but we've been doing some work with the Drupal Association over the last couple months. And one of the things that we did when we started working with the Drupal Association is on this project that we were working on is we put together a charter, an agreement. What is it that we're working on? I think this thing was what, 16 pages? 16 pages that really laid out. And so we had a lot of clarity, a lot of context about what we were doing and what the goals were. Not necessarily how we were going to do it, but what needed to be done and why it needed to be done. And I was talking with some folks from Drupal Association the other day, and they're like, that went really smoothly, that project. And it's like, yeah, we were all literally on the same 16 pages. So, so having those that clarity is really important. Not just the project charter, but also the roles. Does everyone know what they're doing on this project, what they're bringing to it? What maybe they have some professional development goals as part of this project, and working agreements. How are we going to work together? If somebody has a health emergency, how are we going to deal with that? Or maybe if they just want to take a vacation, how they let the team know, how much time in advance do they let the team know? All those things should be agreed upon by the team working on the project. So then finally, to support all this, right, it meant that instead of chasing every interesting opportunity that came our way, we would instead focus on winning larger multi-year engagements where we could bring meaningful and lasting value to our clients. We had already begun this process, and as it turns out, the fact that we specialize in Drupal means that we're a great fit for those larger sort of public and institutional clients that we wanted to work with. The other thing that we needed to work on was improving psychological safety. Because our team members at that point were used to being told by managers what to do and how to do it, they were understandably reluctant to put themselves forward and engage in a meaningful way, either with each other or as members of a larger team. So we started initially by introducing some lightweight practices, such as core protocols and liberating structures, which are designed to encourage engagement and provide a framework for participatory decision-making. Over time, these kind of just became informal practices that were kind of just a standard part of how we work, such as checking in with each other at the start of any meeting. Tiffany started providing more financial transparency with high-level weather reports that were shared quarterly as part of our all-company meetings. These help reinforce understanding of our business model, larger market trends that we're seeing, and how we're doing against benchmarks such as revenue, cash reserves, and utilization. We've also done a little bit of experimenting with providing more financial transparency at the team level. And again, because it's kind of a smaller team, I think it gets a little bit more, people have a little bit more feelings about that, but we're working on doing that so that people can really, without fear, understand just sort of how they're doing against expectations and make adjustments as needed. We introduced a tree model for decision making, which divides different kinds of decisions into leaf, branch, trunk, and root. So a leaf decision is one that's safe for an individual team member to make on their own, doesn't approval or impact anyone else's work. I need to buy a new office chair. Yes, you can just do that. Branch decisions are ones that project teams can make because they really only impact the members of that team. So again, that might be something like, having an agreement on, if somebody is going to be, on vacation during the project, how is that communicated? That sort of thing. The stuff that goes into the charter. Trunk decisions require coordination between multiple teams because they impact multiple teams. And root level decisions are ones that have an existential impact on the company. And so those are typically ones that Tiffany or I, with advice from others, need to make. Things that might impact our financial model, something like that. So we documented all of this and more into a field guide, which combines a lot of the existing resources that we had with new material that was edited and reviewed by a volunteer group of team members. And this is helping to build that scaffolding that people need in order to be able to engage effectively with the broader Palantir system and participate in an informed way in decision making. And then finally, when we resumed our in-person retreats last year, we adopted a format called open space technology, where there's no preset agenda. Instead, people propose topics around a high-level theme, and whoever's interested in them shows up, right? The rules are simple. Whoever comes are the right people. Whatever happens is the only thing that could have happened. Whenever it starts is the right time, and when it's over, it's over. So we've used this format at our last two retreats. It's been transformative. We've had conversations that we never would have had if we had used a more traditional format. People leave feeling more connected and more engaged than ever before. So one of the questions that comes up all the time is, if you don't have a traditional management structure, who's responsible for performance, professional development? Palantir, every team member is assigned 2 peer coaches who meet with that person regularly, both as a group and in one-on-ones, to help them with their career growth and professional development goals. They don't manage the team members' work. They don't provide performance feedback. Their role is to provide mentorship and coaching as needed and to assist with the leveling and promotion process. So we have defined levels for every discipline at Palantir. Salaries are based solely on your level, not your seniority, your past experience, your education level, or your location. Pay levels are automatically increased every year based on cost of living, so even if you stay at the same level, your salary will continue to go up. So to determine someone's level, we have a role-based structure that identifies demonstrated foundational skills for each discipline, in addition to system and consulting skills that are the same for every role at Palantir. We have a web application, which you can actually access yourself at rbs.palantir.net, that enables people to calculate their own level, and it allows their peer coaches to also evaluate the level of someone they're working with. So when someone thinks they're ready for a promotion, they work with their peer coaches to identify a growth plan that will help them get to that next level, and then document examples that justify the scores within that role-based structure. So it's an entirely self-initiated process. Person works with their peer coaches to put together a promotion packet, which is then reviewed by a committee. If everyone agrees promotion is justified, everything's in order, then the team member schedules a promotion celebration where everyone is invited to celebrate that team member and say really nice things about them. It's a beautiful experience. And then, of course, when it comes to performance management, that is largely handled by the individual project teams. If someone is struggling, the team will work with that person to identify the support that they might need. In the rare cases when that's not successful, then the team might write up a performance improvement request with areas of concern that need to be addressed. And then if that person, in collaboration with their peer coach, is unable or unwilling to address those needs, only then would a separation be made. So, even though we're over 6 years into this journey, it does feel like we're just getting started. I tell you what we've experienced so far is increased engagement and morale at all levels of the organization. That includes me. People are more engaged and passionate about their work and client success than they ever have been before. We've also seen that potential problems are being surfaced and addressed sooner rather than later, which is important not just for our team, but also for client satisfaction. By moving from a management paradigm to a coaching one, we've also had more success developing junior level talent. Instead of recruiting from a small pool of established Drupal experts, we're actually growing them in-house. We've also had some success improving, a fair amount of success, improving the overall diversity of our team so that it looks a lot more like the populations that we and our clients serve. Because we have more team cohesion and less churn, we're better equipped to work on those large multi-year engagements for public institutions, governments, higher education, healthcare that have a positive impact on people's lives. And as the icing on the cake, we've also had our highest revenues in our 28-year history. To be clear, our goal has never been to pursue growth, but to build an organization that's built to thrive for the long haul. And by that measure, we're doing much better than we've ever been. especially considering the volatility of the last few years. So, if this sounds like something you're interested in for your organization, what do you need to be successful? First, a culture with a sense of curiosity and an abundance mindset. This may take time to develop. It will require ongoing attention, as there's always a tendency for people to fall back on old patterns when things get tough. Second is a willingness to let go of old ways, even if they've worked in the past. If there are people who are unable to do this, they might leave the organization. And again, that's okay. You must, however, have a leadership team that is fully on board. This is not an easy path to take. There will be plenty of challenges along the way, but leadership perseverance is absolutely essential. Speaking of leaders, it's important for those leaders to have faith in their teams, that they will rise to the occasion and take on new things. I've seen so many people at Palantir whose leadership potential has been untapped as we've gone through our journey over the last few years, and it's been amazing to experience. And finally, you can't do it alone. So we work with a really great team from Greater Than, who help us navigate the ups and downs of our organizational transformation, as well as the challenges that we experience every day. They provide our team with coaching, training, facilitation, and they bring a wealth of knowledge and experience in both self-management and organizational agility. So, with that, I want to thank everyone. You can connect with me on social media or either Masson or LinkedIn. But for now, I wanted to open the floor for questions. Jam, go see Jam if you have questions. Hi there. I can hear you.
All right, good. So I have one question. Like, it sounds like you have a kind of a metric recommendation, or maybe you can just quickly elaborate on that one, because like you have your dedicated project team, but then you have your peer coaches on the other side. So I'm not sure if that's like the same kind of person or like how's that organized?
It's the same people.
Repeat the question.
Yeah, so sorry, to repeat the question is, if I understand correctly, it's around just sort of the how we organize between sort of the project teams and the peer coaches. So, by and large, and there's a couple of exceptions. There are a couple of external coaches who might work with our teams, but the peer coaches are fellow team members, and so and we have basically in their time they have an allocation for that, so that they can have time to do it alongside their regular project work, and because it is a peer coaching relationship. We're not expecting them to come in, as certified coaches or anything like that. They're really working alongside their peers, and have that relationship, which is distinct from sort of the project team relationship, in order to work with them, be a sounding board, help them with their professional development, etc. Yeah, it is matrix according to disciplines. So, right, for example, if you are on our UX team, you're going to have at least one peer coach who you work with who also is within that discipline. So they kind of understand. They may not work with you on the same project all the time, but they understand your skill set. And then we also typically have another peer coach who represents kind of more of a larger company perspective as well. And so that person might not be within the same discipline as the person, but you always have multiple perspectives represented. Yeah.
Hi, so you talked about the career growth and peer coaching, and when someone is ready for a promotion, they have a packet and some people decide on it. And I wonder if it's possible that many people are ready for promotion, they have their packets, and what happens if there are too many people to get promoted?
That's that's a great question, and that's actually one of the things we're working on, because right, if you have everyone going for promotion at the same time, then eventually you're going to get to a place where you're kind of all senior people who are at that higher wage level, which is going to impact the financial model. So for us, we haven't quite run into that yet. We have a really good kind of feeder system for junior level folks. We work with folks at Drupal Easy on internship programs and everything. When you get beyond a certain level, though, like when you get to like a level 10, the level of difficulty to go to the next level increases, right? And so when you're sort of at that higher level, then the expectation is really that you're not just performing well on your projects, contributing to your team, but that you're also working to contribute to the organization as a whole, right? And so, because, that requires a lot of time and a lot of work, I think it kind of allows that to sort of even out.
And it also is based around the idea that the higher your level is, the more value
Yeah.
you're contributing to the organization. So if
Right. And as Tiffany is saying, right, when you are at a higher level, you're contributing more to the organization, right? And so that offsets, right, the additional salary cost.
but it's not capped. Like I don't
Right.
have a cap going in anymore.
Yeah, there's no cap. Who else has questions? Or Jim? Jim just volunteered to do this, by the way. He was truly self-organizing. Thank you.
Hi, J.R. Maroney from Simple Information in Washington, D.C.
Hi there.
You employee evaluations, I think you had mentioned you were helping them like understand their goals and objectives. So I was wondering a little if you could tell us a little more about exactly how that works in a practical sense.
Yeah, so we again have the quarterly. So a team member will meet with their peer coach. They'll have one-on-ones, bi-weekly, monthly, whatever. They work that out. But at least quarterly, the entire group gets together, and that's that place where they kind of discuss, okay, where you been, what you been working on, what are your goals for the next quarter or the next year or whatever. To date, and then if they're ready, I mean, if they want to, like, hey, it's been a while, I think I would like to do another leveling. I may or may not think I need a promotion, but I just kind of need to understand where I'm at, right? So that is always an option. One of the things we're working on right now is actually introducing a new tool into Palantir from a company called Talbot. I think they're based in Finland or Sweden, a Norwegian country, which are very distinct countries and have their own distinct things. I just want to make sure I understand that. And so what that will actually allow folks to do is kind of, in collaboration with their peer coaches, is actually better sort of track that career trajectory and make it easier. And because everyone will have kind of the same platform on that they're using to help evaluate, where folks have been and where their goals might be.
And I think that the RBS is matrix, right? There's no one way to be
Right.
successful, whatever,
The-
but they're based around behaviors that show up,
Yeah.
not a defined ladder.
Right. So yeah, again, and if you want to just come up here, Tiffany, that's okay too. Okay. So you say it better than I will.
So our role-based structure is based around the idea of strengths-based leadership. So you are going to excel in ways that build on the strengths you already have and you already bring in. So part of being an organization that taps into human potential is like you acknowledge that there's no one right way to be a developer. There's no one right way to be a project manager. But the way in which you show up, if you can build that on your own strengths, you're going to be much happier. You're going to be much more likely to advance and develop those skills. So the RBS itself is actually matrix by design. And what we do is we have all these different levels, and it basically starts from, am I a beginner? Am I a practicer? Am I an implementer? Am I at the level where I'm mentoring others, or am I at the level where I'm absolutely innovating on this skill? So there's a variety of different skills. As George mentioned, we have our system skills and our consulting skills that everyone at Palantir is expected to be on the journey for in some way or another. And then you have your discipline level skills. And it's okay wherever you are. There's nothing wrong about how you get together, but we have different gates for when we know, oh yeah, you don't have to have all the skills at a level 3 to say, be a level 8 or something like that. You basically have this mix that is unique to you, and it's based around how you show up. It's not based around, oh, I got this certification, right? A certification is talking about your capacity. Because we're an abundance mindset organization, we know that we all function differently at different times. We show up in whatever way we're able to. And so our RBS is about evaluating how the person is showing up right now in this organization, and being able to reflect equal pay for equal responsibilities that recognize the uniqueness that we each bring to it. So,
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, the image on the slide was of a choose your own adventure book, right? And so the idea is that really people get to choose their own path when it comes to career development. Because you know what? We're all different people. We all have a different set of skills. And so we wanted to build a system that facilitates that.
right. And also, what it does is it surfaces how value is created at Palantir. So there's nothing wrong. You could decide that you are a generalist and you want to get good at a lot of things across the board. Totally fine. You can grow in that way. Palantir's fine with you being where you are. But if you're looking to increase the value you contribute to Palantir and therefore increase your salary remuneration, it shows you what that looks like. So we don't put pressure on people to grow or to advance in any one given way, but we're also very clear about this is the way that we see value being added to Palantir, and then that's that cycle that comes back around.
I want to get really good at juggling. That's great. It's not necessarily going to help you at Palantir. It may help you somewhere else.
Yeah.
Do we have time for one more question, do we think? One or two more? I mean, sure. I don't want to, I also know folks want lunch too, so I don't want to, one in the back.
I guess you already probably partially answered my question now. So I'm also managing a team, and like probably most people who do, you sort of have those high achievers which try to do all, right? And then you have the ones that are doing a good job, but you sort of feel like they're stuck, which is fine. They're fine with it. So I'm just wondering if with your system, you sort of get, of the people who are sort of stuck, you get a little bit more intrinsic motivation, because sometimes I feel like you're happy at the place they are at, but there's so much more potential, but somehow you don't get it unlocked, like with the intrinsic on their own. So
I think we've been effective for those people who have potential that, that they're interested in unlocking and are able to unlock. Yes. Again, having all the different options and career paths is absolutely key. But we also have people who are like, again, they're like, you know what? I am okay with just doing what I do every day. I don't want more responsibility. And because we auto increment the salaries every year based on cost of living, inflation, etc., that's okay. We might have somebody who sits at a level 7 for, years, and they're not going to fall behind. They're not going to feel like they've fallen behind. Because again, we've accounted for that, and or people have life changes, right? And they might be in a position where they're like, maybe they're really ready to take on a lot of responsibility, and they're like, but I need to not take on any more for a while. And again, that's okay. We don't want to penalize those folks, and our system is designed so that they'll be all right.
Right. There are a lot of organizations that are up or out, and you've been at a place for a really long time and you haven't advanced. That's their signal to you that maybe you're not going to grow here. And I tend to think of the work that we do as ocean swimming. In order to stay in the same place, you're doing a lot of work. And so as a learning organization, everybody is constantly learning. So the capabilities of a level 7 today have changed from what they were 5 years ago just because the technology changes. We work in an industry. So it isn't to say that you're not still learning, you're not still taking on new challenges. You totally are. But the responsibilities you have are commensurate with that level. And so that's the kind of the piece of the learning organization. You're learning in the work that you're doing all of the time. It's when you take that next level and you really are adding more value to the company, you're able to demonstrate that value, then you move up in your levels. And so that's what that kind of process is about.
Yep. All right. Jim says we're out of time, but thank you all so much. And once again, thank you. And Tiffany too, thank you.